Look up the word crazy in the dictionary, and you might just find an asterisk beside the definition that says, listen to the Subiquitous podcast featuring Sue Duffield, and you'll find out what crazy means. Sue's travelogue journey of unfiltered stories, impossible miracles, and faith-filled fun will be revisited right here. So buckle up, and let's get going with this humorous travelogue of an unfiltered saint, Subiquitous.
I'm clapping for myself. I can shake hands with myself. I just can't shake hands with you. And that really does disturb me. I don't know why. I mean, I was raised to hug people and to touch people and to tease people and and to shake hands. And now we live in this era where it's really not something we can do anymore without thinking, did I just pass along COVID-19? Or am I getting it from him? I don't know. I always think about the Beatles song, too. I want to hold your hand. I want to hold your hand. We can't even do that. Can't even do that. But anyway, holding hands, washing hands. I tell you, hands down, it's the hardest thing I've ever had to do. And that is to quit shaking hands. I mean, we went weeks not being able to find disinfectant wipes or hand sanitizer. And now I went to Kroger the other day and it's everywhere, almost to a point now that they are selling them at half price. So we're keeping our hands to ourselves. Now all of the manufacturers have caught up and our stores are filled with disinfectant and filled with all kinds of things to keep us safe. And you wonder now if anybody's really paying attention. But at the hands of a young man who filled his father's gas tank up with stones is the man in the other room, my guest host, Mr. Jeff Duffield.
The man in the other room. You were talking about your holding hands and shaking hands, and I'm sitting there listening in my brain. I'm listening in my brain.
That's helpful.
Yeah, this Neil Diamond song, the Sweet Caroline. Dun, dun, dun. And
Yeah.
What is the last line there, the second half of the verse? Touching hands,
holding hands,
and whatever. That has no application whatsoever to anything we're doing here today, but
no.
It's what came into my brain. There we go.
Well,
I'm
that's
here.
okay, but tell us about that experience of filling your father's gas tank with stones. I think they would love to hear this.
I'm sure they would. I don't know. I was maybe 3 years old, 4 years old maybe, and we went to visit my grandparents, actually. I believe it was my grandmother. I think my grandfather had passed. And she lived out in the country, and their home had a dirt driveway and with gravel, stone, whatever.
Was it all stones or
Oh, you know.
You don't remember. How old were you?
Maybe 3 or 4,
Oh my
maybe.
goodness. What were you doing outside by yourself? That's what I want to know.
This was not 2020. This was at best 1959, maybe more than likely
okay.
58.
Sure.
In that ballpark, perhaps 60. 1960, I would have been 5 years old, but I doubt it. 5 years old, I would have remembered better. So, no, maybe I was more like 3 years old.
Okay.
In that ballpark. And so we're talking about an entirely different universe. There was no houses within 2 or 3 miles of my grandmother's place.
So nobody would grab you and take you off.
Nobody out there to grab.
They wouldn't grab you by the hand and
no.
They wouldn't even sanitize themselves.
There was nobody come up and grab you. The road would have a car go down it like once an hour.
So what did you do? You grabbed
I was
stones and put them in
I was playing in the yard. Mom and Dad are inside talking to my grandmother, and I'm playing in the yard, and they were happy to have me out there doing that because I wasn't getting in trouble in the house. I don't know what possessed me. All I have remembrance of, and it's very precise, very clear in my brain, is, had a cap, a door on the side of the car, on the fender, and the cap's inside. And I'll have putting the last 2 or 3 stones in where you put the nozzle.
You filled it all the way to the top. How long did it take you? Do you remember?
No, none of that.
Wasn't this your father's new car too, or something?
It was a car he had won some 7 or 8 years before that. It was a brand new car that he had won in a contest in our hometown. All the merchants got together.
So this was his pride and joy.
And yeah,
at least for a little while.
For a little while. And I can remember putting the last couple of stones in there and closing the door.
Then getting in the car when you were getting ready to go home.
Then it fades out. And hours later we decided to leave, and we're driving home. It was dark, and of course when I was doing this was earlier in the day when it's still light outside. And as they say in writing, the scene shifts.
Yes. We
go from me closing the door, and then there's a large gap where I have no recollection. The next scene is me, and again, shows you how long ago this was. I'm standing on the front bench seat of my father's 50 Ford.
Right. No seatbelt.
No, there was not. No. And Mom and Dad are in the front seat, and I'm standing between them. And we're driving home, and it's night. And we didn't get very far, I don't believe. No. And the car starts sputtering and, missing and whatever. And my father was notorious for ignoring that little gauge on his dash that told you were low on fuel. Just one of his things. And so my mother said to him, "George, are you out of gas? How could you?" "No, June, look at the gauge. It says it's full." And it probably was.
So what happened after that?
He pulls over because the car was not running, and he gets out of the car, and he's gone for maybe a minute. And you remember this scene from Christmas Story where Ralphie goes out and goes, "Oh, fudge." Yeah. Kind of similar. Because he was gone maybe a minute.
You knew you were in trouble.
The door opens again, and the long arm, literally speaking, the long arm of my father reaches in and grabs me and yanks me out of the car. And then again, there we fade to black. I have no recollection after that.
You may have gone to heaven.
I may have.
And then been resurrected.
It's a distinct possibility.
Your father took you out.
It's a distinct possibility and I'm sure the only reason I'm here talking to you at this moment is that my mother intervened.
She always intervened for you. You were her favorite.
There's no doubt. So
you've heard of the show Everybody Loves Raymond? Well, you're Raymond.
I cannot argue.
I know that.
I cannot argue.
But the car never worked great again, right? Is that right? Even when they cleaned out the carburetor and did all that?
Dad worked full time at a grocery store. He was working his way up to manager of the A&P. Yeah. But in the meantime, in those days, he was working at a gas station right next to it part-time, and he told me later that they dropped the gas tank and put high compressed air in there to blow it out, because every so often a little sliver of sand or stone would get in the carburetor jets and foul the carburetor up. He said never was quite right after that.
No.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
There was another story I was thinking too about you regarding your hands.
Okay.
See, Jeff has no idea. I mean, I create the podcast episode, and I really don't tell him because it just works much better this way.
There's no really. You just don't tell me.
No, because I want to surprise you every week, because I come up with things that I know that if you get thinking about it, it's not as funny as your immediate spontaneous response.
Okay. So you say.
So you're in a Wawa in South Jersey, and you're all dressed up, and this woman behind the Wawa counter looks at you and says, "Well, what was it then?" Okay, I don't know these stories
you weren't
very
there.
Well.
It was a woman standing behind me in line. It was next customer, and
well, that adds to the story.
Yes,
that's right.
And she's standing there. I realize it's
See, this is what I tell people all the time. I'm gray,
yes,
and you're the literalist.
Yes.
I've had to fight this my whole life.
Yes, but
the details really don't matter. Just get to the point.
I realize, but I'm able to whatever I'm trying to say. Easier if I have it exactly right. Okay, anyway,
I understand.
We've just blown 30 seconds of get to it time by arguing over the fact that what I do. Woman was standing behind me, And she made the comment, if I remember correctly, and it's difficult being distracted with these stories, but if I remember correctly, she made the comment, you must be a lawyer. And because I was dressed,
you said
I was
no.
dressed in a black suit.
That's
and I
right.
turned
You look
around
very
and I
good.
said, no, ma'am, I'm not. Then she said, well, you must be a doctor.
Oh, there you go.
And I said, no, ma'am. As a matter of fact, I'm pretty much removed from both of those occupations.
Yeah.
Well, she says, you got, look at those hands you got.
Ooh, big ones.
And I do have, I
Yeah,
have
that's
fairly wide hands.
Right.
And I'm standing there trying, and this is a total complete stranger, and I'm trying to be careful. And I said, well, yeah, they're my hands, and that's why I use my hands in my job. And do you want me to go ahead and finish?
Yes.
Okay.
And if you don't, I
Okay,
will.
okay.
You want me to say it?
Well,
I'll
then
say
she
it.
says.
Then she said, big hands like that make somebody feel good.
Yes.
And the only bad thing is I wish I was there because I would have said, yes, that man
No, it's
right
a
there that you're
good
looking
thing
at
you weren't.
rubs my feet every single
Yeah,
night.
but I was probably, well, I mean, you probably would have laughed your head off.
I know.
As you have. That happened 25 years ago, and you
right.
still laugh at it.
And I still put my feet on your
Yeah,
lap.
well, yeah.
Rub those
Yeah.
feet, baby. That's what keeps a marriage together.
That'll do it. Yeah. So that was that one. Okay. Well, the sword of Damocles over your head. You feel
Yeah.
like number 3 is coming.
Yeah. Well, no, this is more about me on this
Okay.
one.
Okay. Good.
My mother, my mother's hands were very small. She was very petite.
Yes.
And she would never, ever spank us with her hands.
I don't blame her.
No, because we were bigger than her by third grade. My mother was only 4'9", but
say,
then
it
we
wasn't-
find out later she was only
It
4'6".
wasn't saying much. Yeah.
No, but you know what my mother was classic at? Getting the fly swatter.
Aha.
And I got many of a beating with a fly swatter. Not by her hand, but by a fly
Well,
swatter.
why hurt your hand when you have such, something like that it can be used much more effectively.
I know. So then I was reading about Texas and their whole coronavirus prevention campaign. I don't know if you saw
So
this
we're
or
going
not.
from big hands like that and fly swatters to
yeah,
Texas.
Yeah, because it's still hand related.
I'll stay there with you. Go ahead.
Okay. The Texas Coronavirus Task Force has said on their signs to wash your hands like you just got done slicing jalapenos for a batch of nachos, and you need to take your contacts out. Think about that for a minute.
Yeah, okay.
And it says it's about you have to really wash your hands about 20 seconds long to get off those jalapenos off your hand. Otherwise, you put it in your eyeballs and singeroo.
Yeah.
We got to call in the healing line.
That reminds me of the product BioFreeze that I use
that's
on my sore muscles in my back when they occasionally let me know they're there.
I think we ought to get some sort of a advertiser for seniors.
Sponsorship. Yeah, there you go.
The sponsorship,
Yeah.
the way we talk about getting old and
right. Well,
and BioFreeze.
BioFreeze is a great product. It works very well. However, once you apply it to the sore area, it is very advisable that before you do anything else or touch anything else on your person, that you make sure you wash your hands well. If you do that, it's no problem.
It's not a
If
problem.
you do not do that, you will instantly regret it.
So big hands like that, and keep your hands to yourself. And my mother not using her hands, and she would much rather use a fly swatter to keep my brother and I on the sacred path, as we say. I did this past week, learned something too about myself, that I had to relearn how to grip a golf club.
Or
Because,
relearn
holding
or learn?
Or learn. Well, I think maybe a few years ago, my son tried to show me how to hold a golf club. It really goes out of, to hold a baseball bat is so much easier for me because it's just like a fist on a fist.
Right.
But with a golf club,
It's an interlocking grip.
it's weird.
Speaking of golf clubs,
Yes.
I guess there's a segue there
it could be.
because we did go play golf the other day.
We did, and it wasn't great, but it was okay. You were wonderful, though.
No. It's quite obvious I hadn't played in many months, but You were a beginner.
Yeah, I'm a beginner.
And
I'm getting
you
there.
did fine. We, quickly after a couple of holes, we got away from the drivers in the woods, and we got you with, hearkening back to your father's advice to me many years ago.
Sure.
We went with one of the middle irons, which are easier to hit, and you did fine.
I did okay. I need to go though. I need to go just. I thought about this the other day. Just get the golf club and walk around with it in my hand a little bit, just to understand how to interlock my hands.
I guess.
I don't know.
I guess. Yeah.
But we also spent some time with our first grandson too.
We did.
Jameson,
Yes.
which was kind of
Yes,
fun,
we did.
and everybody knows this. Even on the Christie side of the family, they all know this, that Jameson has his pop-up Duffield's hands.
Yeah, it sure appears that way.
When I look at those hands, I think, oh my word, they look exactly like yours.
Yeah, they do.
It's amazing to me.
Yep. There is such a thing as genetics, isn't there?
Yep.
And I guess there's the thing about his hair.
Oh yeah, you've got the double crown thing in his head.
Yeah, I've got the double crown, and I guess no one else does either. It has nothing to do with hands, but
we shall wear a robe and crown or something. I don't know.
something like that.
Well, Jeff Duffield, this portion of the program means that you are done.
Oh boy,
You are more than
I'm
done.
baked.
We were kind of all over the
Yeah,
place.
stick a fork in him, he's done.
But hands down, you're the best. It's a truth.
Sweet Caroline. Okay.
But I'm going to talk a little bit, and you can listen if you
I'll
like.
listen. I just won't talk.
Okay, that's
All right.
fine. You can be
Goodbye.
done then. All right, I'll see you tomorrow. Make something to eat for dinner. John Maxwell wrote an incredible book a few years ago called Everyone Communicates and Few Connect. If you haven't read this book, it's been out probably 8-9 years now on Thomas Nelson Publishers. But the whole book sparked an amazing memory for me, and also a realization that in my whole life I've studied people's hands. My dad was classic at this. My father was a hard worker. At one point in our lives, he had 3 jobs. Most of the jobs that he had, blue-collar working, his hands would get greasy and grimy and oily, but when he would come home, he would use all kinds of soaps and lotions to keep his hands clean and soft, and we used to laugh at him actually. He would groom his nails all the time, to a point where we'd say, can you, he'd always be doing something with his nails, somehow with a nail file or whatever. He was always working at his hands, but he had the best looking hands too. They were always tan, and my father having that Irish, English kind of dark skin, he just always looked great and always took great pride in keeping his hands clean. And of course, Jeff, we talked about him as a piano player. He's always had great looking hands, and he has an incredible, from the thumb to his pinky finger, an incredible wide stance that he's able to play those octaves like he does on the piano. And even when my kids were little, I remember just staring, and as a young mother, just staring at the hands, the incredible workmanship that God created in these beings. And I just am so overwhelmed with how God creates us. We have one grandson, however, that has a radio clubbed hand, and let me just tell you something. We have learned a whole new process. This diversity in this lovely, precious saint of a baby. He is learning things that you can't believe. There is nothing that's going to stop him, nothing whatsoever in his life. The way his mom and dad are raising him to do everything already. He's a year old. And we watch how Nolan has adjusted because he's never known anything else. He has one hand that's, normal and what we know as normal. And then the other hand, there are 2 fingers that are fused. He has a little finger that's basically just cartilage, but he's working and he's using it, and it's just so much fun to watch. And we've decided as a family, obviously, as those of you that may have someone in your family with a diversified, maybe difficulty with their physical bodies in some ways, we treat them all like they can do anything. And Nolan, let me tell you, there is not going to be a thing that's going to hold him back. So kids that have hands very different, I'm also reminded of, the hands when I first met my best friend, Dawn, who lives in Michigan. I remember looking at her hands the very first time I saw her. She had a wedding band, a very wide gold wedding band on her ring finger. And I just remember her hands being so well groomed and just seeing that wide. I had a diamond. She didn't have a diamond, but she had a wide wedding band. I thought, that is so cool. That looks so unique. So I obviously am telling you this for a reason. I admire hands. I remember seeing my grandmother's hands in her final stages, knowing that they were crippled with rheumatoid arthritis, and just holding her hand meant so much to me, because I knew that they were years and years and years of difficulty, of her working through difficult circumstances in her body. But I have to tell you, I have surrounded myself purposely over the years with beautiful hands of people that I adore. And most of all, I'll never forget my dad's hands, mostly. And like I said, he was a hardworking, blue-collar worker. He abused his hands every single day, but yet maintained them to be immaculately manicured, tan and perfect. I never understood how he did that, but he was able to do that. It was a paradox of something both functional and inspirational to me as a child. And the hands that fixed my bicycles, painted my bedroom avocado green from pink. I was that 70s child. He fixed refrigeration units and pointed me in the direction of extravagantly caring for others. They were also the hands that liberally defined his soul. And while I lay bruised and injured, sitting on a stretcher in an emergency room following a front-end collision with my 1973 Plymouth Gold Duster, I only had it 6 weeks. This 17-year-old was a complete wreck. And I mean, when I say I was a wreck, first of all, I did some damage to my nose when my nose hit the steering wheel when I rear-ended that fine young gentleman who was one of my neighbors, actually. I was probably as upset as I was about my car as I was my nose, but I was a wreck in that emergency room until, and I say that with a big capital U, until I felt my dad's hand touch my shoulders. And you know what? I knew immediately who it was without turning around. I knew exactly who it was. I felt his power. I felt his sense of touch. And it was a familiar calming and an instant connection that said, it's okay. You're going to be okay. That little segment is on page 63 in Everyone Communicates and Few Connect of John C. Maxwell's book. And in my years of speaking and maybe hopefully communicating and connecting the gospel, whether by song, word, or comedy, you know what? I've become very aware of how powerful the hands are in both giving and receiving the subtle delivery of facts, and the delivery of faith, and even the delivery of truth, compassion, and overall coordination of the heart and body. Definition says of hands, they are the chief organs for physically manipulating the environment. Do you feel like we've been manipulated? And without me getting into any kind of a political rant here, I feel like at times we have been manipulated. And so therefore, it's a scary process, but it's true. But our hands do express the depth of one's innermost thoughts and emotions. It's usually a dead giveaway, to me anyway, when a speaker that I may be sitting in the audience and I watch them try to get their point across. I watch not only their body language, but I watch what they do with their hands. And sometimes the hands are not in sync with what they're saying. And they try to manipulate something that the heart is just not in the process. So I think about this for a minute. It's no wonder that Jesus, knowing the power that he was, the Son of God, made it a point to touch and connect beyond words. You know, lives were instantly healed and changed simply by his touch. I mean, there were women that the one woman who grabbed the crespidon of his prayer shawl he felt power released from him. So here I am. A few weeks ago, I was paying for a manicure and sitting in a chair with my fresh polished nails in a pretty metallic burgundy, and I do all I can to make my hands look beautiful. But guess what I've done during this pandemic? I have given up acrylics. And so now I'm working on my own hands, and I'm telling you the truth that when I start to roll back a little bit on my cuticles and I start to file, I feel like my father's in the room. I feel like he's looking at me going, see, it's genetic. I will do all I can to make my hands look beautiful, but the truth is, they're not made for cosmetic purposes just that alone. Here's a real passion. I'm ready to rid myself of the pretty hands gospel. You know what I'm talking about. And get downright dirty and calloused until someone is moved and changed by the touch of the gospel. So I go back and forth, and I think about John, as in Maxwell here. And I'm not surprised that every promo photo of John Maxwell on websites and on bios and on the inside of his book sleeve, every single picture of John Maxwell has his hands in the photo. Tell me something. Headshots alone, photographers, if you're out there, how many times have you asked somebody to put their hands in the photo? There are some shots that they've done that, but not very many. So I say to myself, what does John try to say with his photo? He's trying to share with us the importance of not only our visual, but how important our hands are in portraying and defining something significant about who you are and how you relate non-verbally. So hands down, that's the best I can think of. And that surely is the best that I can come up with on this episode number 7. Because over the years, I am so grateful that there have been times I have had no words. Words have been absolutely escaped out of my brain, but by literally putting my hand out and just grabbing and shaking hands or just touching someone on the shoulder and not saying a word has been one of the greatest healing experiences of my life. So that 17-year-old that is sitting in the emergency room after I've been pawed on by every emergency room nurse and doctor taking my blood pressure and checking my eyes and checking my nose and an x-ray and having hands all over me. I'm sitting there with my face down, and suddenly a hand comes from around the curtain. And I know this hand, not by visual, but it's the hand of a secure daddy, a secure father who took care of his daughter. Can I tell you something? Your Heavenly Father is putting his hand on your shoulder right now. Thanks for listening today to the Subiquitous Podcast. There are a few ways that we can stay connected: by email, radiosue@me.com, Instagram, Subiquitous Podcast, and my website, SueDuffield.com. But this week we're launching Patreon, where you, my friend and listener, can be a monthly subscriber in support of this outreach. Check out all the perks from bronze, silver, gold, ruby, emerald, diamond, and even the VIP multi-gem tiers. So many great ways to receive some great perks while helping me to reach the virtual world. Patreon.com/Sue Duffield. Join me and I'll see you next week.